In my younger years, I never imagined the challenges life would bring. Growing up in a simple home, I valued stability and believed strong relationships and trust were the foundation of life. This belief carried into adulthood, where I focused on my career, my wife, and our children, unaware that the very things I valued would one day be tested. Through marriage and fatherhood, I assumed love and loyalty were unshakable. My wife and I built a life together, or so I thought. We raised two great kids and managed our careers, and I felt secure that we could handle whatever came our way. But trust was unraveling long before I realized it. One evening, after a typical day of work and family time, playing with the kids, sharing dinner, and watching a baseball game, I felt a deep sense of peace as my wife fell asleep beside me. I had no idea it would be the last normal day of my life. The next day, around noon, I got a frantic call from Carrie. She was crying, saying something about our son, Troy, kidney disease, and the hospital. I rushed there and met with Dr. Fierstos, who explained that Troy had been admitted with severe pain. How a healthy freshman developed stage 3 kidney disease was a mystery, and a specialist was on the way. Carrie and I stayed positive for Troy, but it was hard. Carrie searched the condition on her phone, pale with worry, while I tried to lighten the mood for Troy. When Dr. Nicholas arrived, he confirmed Troy needed an urgent kidney transplant to survive and finish high school. The news hit hard. Troy burst into tears, and Carrie followed. Dr. Nicholas explained that while kidney transplants are more common now, finding a donor is still challenging. The best chance was a family member, but that was a problem. I was an only child. Carrie had just one sibling with 2 young kids, and our 17-year-old daughter couldn't donate. Despite testing 7 family members, none were a match. We were devastated, though the doctors tried to stay optimistic. The following week was filled with tears, both in the hospital and at home. Then something unexpected happened, like a miracle. Carrie reached out to Sergio Santiago, an 18-year-old we called our nephew, the son of close family friends Jorge and Robbie Santiago. Although we thought we weren't related, it turned out Sergio was a match for Troy as a third-party donor. Dr. Nicholas was excited. "A family match is best, and a half-sibling is almost as good," he said. "But he's not a stepbrother," I replied, stunned. Realization hit hard. My mind stopped for a moment, then everything came crashing down. While it felt like a miracle for Troy, I knew my marriage was over. I looked at Carrie, who seemed to shrink in front of me. "Carrie, baby," I whispered, but she looked away, her face flushed. "I can't focus on anything but Troy right now," she said. "I had to try for Troy's sake," she added. "Thank you for finally thinking of someone else," I responded flatly. Our marriage was clearly over, but we had to save Troy. "How long until they get here?" I asked. "They'll arrive Thursday," she answered softly. "Fine, they can stay with us as usual," I said, resigned. The Santiagos had stayed with us about 6 times over the years. Our basement was a guest suite with 2 bedrooms and a full bath, not as luxurious as the hotels they usually stayed in, but they were family. Carrie and Robbie had been roommates at Iowa State for 2 years, and Robbie was already dating Jorge when I started seeing Carrie. At first, I didn't get along with Jorge, who came from a wealthy Spanish family and seemed like a spoiled playboy. But eventually I saw he was a good guy, just out of touch with the real world. We became friends mostly because our wives were best friends. There were even campus rumors that Carrie and Robbie were more than friends, but I never saw any proof. Robbie and Jorge married 6 months after we graduated, with Carrie as a bridesmaid. 6 months later, Robbie was a bridesmaid at our wedding in Champaign, Illinois. Life became incredibly hectic after Troy's diagnosis. Dialysis became part of our daily routine, with doctors and nurses constantly around. We had to prepare for the surgery, post-op care, medications, and the mental toll. It was overwhelming for a 14-year-old like Troy, who had been strong, athletic, and quick-witted until this hit. Now, he was scared and in pain, and I felt helpless. Carrie was suffering just as much, but I didn't confront the bigger issue yet. I worked half days that week, trying to focus on something other than Troy's illness and Carrie's affair. Work was the only part of my life that didn't hurt. At home, Carrie and I were rarely alone, and when we were, our daughter AJ was usually with us, making it impossible to talk. At night, we shared the bedroom, but only to sleep. Exhaustion became a welcome escape. Normally, the Santiago's arrival would bring a festive atmosphere, but this time felt different. The usual hugs went around, excluding me, and the mood was subdued. I stood back, feeling a mix of anger and nausea. After a few minutes, Robbie noticed me, blushed, and came over to give me a tight hug. I'm so sorry, Josh. Honestly, she whispered before pulling away. I nodded, not saying a word. Everyone was watching me. Neither Troy nor AJ knew the truth about their connection to Sergio, and they just assumed his match for Troy was an incredible coincidence. We adults decided to keep the secret for now. Sergio had known for 4 years, apparently understanding the story his parents told him. Everyone seemed to have accepted it, except me. I doubted I ever would. Once the Santiagos settled in, Carrie and Sergio went to the hospital to visit Troy, while AJ and I stayed home. As soon as Carrie's car pulled away, AJ confronted me. What's going on, Dad? I'm not stupid. Something's up between you and Mom, and it involves Aunt Robbie and Uncle Jorge. If you don't tell me, I'll ask Sergio. He tells me everything. It's hard to hide things from smart kids, and AJ was sharp. I decided to tell her what I knew, which wasn't much. I explained that her mother had cheated on me with Jorge, and that Sergio was her and Troy's half-brother. That's why Sergio was a match for Troy. Wow, she whispered. Wait, you didn't know until Troy got sick, did you? That's why you've been acting weird around Mom. I nodded, feeling embarrassed. But then AJ dropped another bomb. You also didn't know Mom shared a bedroom with Aunt Robbie and Uncle Jorge during our trips to Spain, did you? They stopped when I was 12. Mom said it was because she and Robbie were like sisters and you knew. I was stunned, unable to speak. AJ quickly apologized, realizing I had no idea. What are you going to do? She asked softly. Right now, nothing. We need to focus on Troy's surgery first. After that, we'll deal with everything else. Please don't say anything until then, I asked. Of course, Dad, I've got your back, she said. Thank you, sweetheart, I replied. I stayed distant around my wife and the Santiagos, noticing that Carrie, Robbie, and Jorge exchanged frequent glances and whispered a lot. On Friday evening, Sergio pulled me aside quietly. Can we talk? Just the two of us, Uncle Josh? Is it important? I asked. How could I refuse you? You're saving my son and your half-brother, I said softly, watching his eyebrows rise in surprise. We walked around the neighborhood and Sergio began, I know this situation is terrible and awkward, but I'm glad I can help Troy. I need to ask you a favor, though. Please don't divorce Aunt Carrie because of this, and don't hurt my dad. I studied his face, seeing more of Jorge in him, but now I also saw a bit of my wife. He did resemble Troy. How hadn't I noticed this before? I can't promise I'll stay with Carrie after Troy goes to college, but I won't take revenge on your dad. That's the best I can do, Sergio, I replied. I then asked, how do you feel about all this, about Aunt Carrie and being Troy's half-brother? I was scared at first, but I wouldn't be here without them. Mom will always be my mom, and Aunt Carrie is still Aunt Carrie to me, though I feel closer to her now. I've always seen Troy as a little brother, and now he really is. I'm just glad I can help him. We walked back in silence, giving me even more to process. The situation was worse than I thought. The transplant happened the following Tuesday. 5 tense people waited for hours, but both boys came through the surgery fine, and Troy's new kidney worked immediately, which the doctor said was a great sign. That evening, 5 exhausted people left the hospital. 2 days later, Robbie offered to join me for takeout at my favorite Chinese restaurant. On the drive, she broke down and apologized. Over the next 40 minutes, I learned the full story, and by the time we got home, I'd lost my appetite. I was in the Naval Reserve for 20 years and deployed overseas 3 times, I began. The first deployment was a year after Carrie and I got married, and I spent 18 months in the Middle East. Carrie stayed with Robbie and Jorge the whole time. Robbie, with tears in her eyes, said, I know it shouldn't have happened, but it did. One night we were having fun and ended up in the same bed. That gave me an idea, the worst idea I've ever had. I can't have children, and I desperately wanted a baby. So I thought Carrie could get pregnant by Jorge and I'd adopt the child. You'd never have to know. I stayed silent, watching Robbie as she continued. The plan worked perfectly. Carrie had a beautiful baby boy, and by the time you got home 6 months later, she had lost most of the weight. We just told you she had gained a little from eating rich food. Robbie blushed, but said nothing more. I talked to AJ, I said, prompting her to respond. Oh, she whispered, I'm not stupid. She didn't just sleep with him once. They were together a lot before the baby and kept going for years, right in front of me. They weren't just friends. They became lovers, I said, frustrated. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm down. I didn't expect any of this. But once it happened, I had to accept it. I loved my child, and I cared about Jorge and Carrie, so I chose to stay. Those business trips, the vacations, those were when it happened. she admitted, regret in her eyes. Once AJ was old enough to understand, Carrie and Jorge started going off together, leaving the kids with me and Sergio, she explained. Don't be mad, Josh. We all got something from this. I got my son, Carrie and Jorge had time together, and Troy got a new kidney. That's not how I see it, Robbie, I replied. The kidney was a coincidence. Everyone got something except me. I wasn't part of your arrangement. I never agreed to my wife getting pregnant for you or having an affair for 19 years. Maybe I was the one having an affair with Carrie, not the other way around. I won't settle for just part of my wife's heart. I'm an all-or-nothing guy, and Carrie should have known that. So what now, Josh? She asked, almost pleading. I don't know, I said. I promised Sergio I'd stay with Carrie while Troy is still at home and wouldn't hurt Jorge. How could you and Jorge do this? I thought we were family. Family doesn't do this to each other, Robbie. We pulled into the driveway, and the conversation ended there. Both boys were discharged from the hospital and back home within a week. Modern medicine is incredible. If all goes well, Troy and Sergio will both live long, healthy lives. The unspoken tension lingered until the Santiagos were set to leave. I arranged for AJ to stay with the boys, watching TV and eating pizza, while the adults gathered in my home office. I brought wine and deli meats, noticing that Carrie and Jorge sat together on the couch, while Robbie sat alone. After we filled our plates, I started the conversation. I praised Sergio for stepping up and acknowledged how well Robbie and Jorge had raised him. Carrie agreed, but there was more on my mind. Let's get real, I said, looking at Carrie and Jorge. I'm furious at both of you. If I hadn't promised Sergio, you'd both be dead. Carrie and Jorge didn't respond. How could you do this to me, Carrie? Cheat on me, have a child with Jorge, and keep seeing him for 18 years, right in front of our kids. Carrie seemed like she wanted to say something, but stayed silent. Oh, and you've been sneaking around again, haven't you? How many times this week? I asked. Robbie finally spoke up. Only twice, as far as I know. I groaned. Not in our bed, I hope. Carrie didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the floor. I get it now, I said quietly. You might love me, but you're in love with him. He's your number one, and I'm just number two. Tell me I'm wrong. The room was silent. I finished my wine and offered to refill theirs, but they all declined. I love you, Josh. I never left you for him. We only met when you weren't around, Carrie finally said. How sweet, I replied bitterly. You took away my trust, loyalty, and devotion. Carrie tried to meet my eyes, but I kept going. I don't recall our vows giving you permission to cheat while I was in the Middle East, sweating it out, and you were in Spain, getting pregnant with his child. Carrie stayed silent. You at least started hiding it from the kids after a while, except this week, apparently. Everyone sat quietly, staring at the floor. And now, I added, dripping with sarcasm, you conveniently had a son to save Troy. At least you showed some self-sacrifice for once, Carrie. Robbie was sobbing, Jorge looked guilty, and Carrie's expression shifted between guilt, fear, and anger when I called her selfish. So what happens now, Josh? Carrie asked cautiously. I don't want a divorce. I promised your first son I wouldn't break my vows. You've got 4 years until Troy leaves for college, and then we'll divorce. We won't discuss this in front of him, I said firmly. But you will tell him that Sergio is his half-brother, and I'll be there to ensure you tell the truth. A story about a woman who cheated, not a romanticized affair. Carrie's face went pale. Troy will be happy to know Sergio's his brother. They're already close, I added. AJ accepted it after getting over her anger at how you treated me. Does she know everything? Carrie asked shakily. What did you tell her? I didn't have to tell her much. She's smart and figured out most of it on her own. There are some gaps you should fill in, though, I said. She knew enough, but because of your lies, she never came to me. She only told me what she suspected. When I asked, she felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. Troy, though, still doesn't know anything. And of course, Sergio has known for years that you two made a mockery of our marriage. Carrie blushed deeply, swallowing hard as I continued. I've seen the pity in Sergio's eyes over the years. It's great when a teenager looks at you with pity because he knows his father and your wife have betrayed you. Everyone got something from this except me, I said, my voice sharp. I was written out. That's not true, Josh, Carrie said weakly, her voice cracking. I love you. I've been a good wife and mother. If it weren't for this kidney situation, you'd still be happy and clueless. Why can't we go back to the happy times? I never refused you, Zex. So I should be happy as your second choice just because I didn't know? I asked, disbelief rising. I was supposed to be your only one, no other numbers. Was I ever your number one? Her eyes flicked away. At the beginning, she mumbled. When we first got married, before I moved in with Robbie and Jorge. So you weren't thinking of Jorge when we made love? I asked, the pain clear in my voice. How could you give me 2 children if you loved someone else? I thought you deserved children of your own. I love you, remember? She pleaded. Right, I said bitterly. And judging by your actions, you love our kids just as much as you love your child with him. Carrie made a face, glancing at Robbie and Jorge, perhaps seeking support, but none came. We should discuss this privately, not drag Robbie and Jorge into our problem, Carrie said sharply, trying to deflect. Are you serious? I shouted, unable to hold back. Robbie and Jorge created this problem. All 3 of them went pale, clearly nervous. I've promised Sergio, and I'll keep that promise, I said, calming myself. But Carrie, I need a promise from you. Stay faithful until Troy leaves for college. No trips to Spain without me, no visits to Jorge while I'm away for reserve duty. Faithful means faithful. If you break this, I'll break my promise to Sergio and file for divorce immediately. Understood? Robbie gave a slight smile, seemingly understanding the seriousness. Carrie and Jorge sat in stunned silence. Thank you, Robbie, I added. This promise helps you too, doesn't it? After a moment, Carrie nodded. Good, I said, more relaxed. Wine, anyone? Once the Santiagos returned to Spain, I moved into the basement guest room. Carrie and I hadn't had Zex since Troy got sick, which now worked in my favor after learning about her affair. Don't be childish, Josh, Carrie snapped one evening. We had Zex so many times while I was with Jorge, and you didn't know. Exactly, I growled. I didn't know. Now that I do, my feelings have changed. Carrie looked stunned, as if she hadn't anticipated how this would unfold. Modern medicine is incredible. 6 months after surgery, Troy was back to his old self, joking around and acting like a typical teenager. Although he had to take medication for transplant rejection and couldn't play football, his life was nearly back to normal. I felt it was time to tell him the truth about Sergio. Carrie, however, wanted to leave things as they were, hoping Troy would figure it out on his own. Seriously? I asked. That's what you told me? After some hesitation, Carrie agreed. Troy had just turned 15, and I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. I could only hope Carrie understood that too. When we finally told him, Troy took the news that Sergio was his half-brother pretty well, since they were already close. But the how was harder to handle. Wait, did you sleep with Uncle Jorge? But you were married to Dad. That makes you a traitor, he shouted, clearly hurt. Carrie started to argue, but I squeezed her hand, stopping her. She fell silent, ashamed. After a long pause, I said, Yes, but that's between me and your mom. I didn't know until you got sick, and she called the Santiagos for help. Sergio saved your life, so show some gratitude. Troy lowered his head, still upset, and I understood. If anyone had the right to be angry, it was me. But this was between me and Carrie. We'll get through this, I added. I'm not leaving. That's why I moved to the basement. AJ, sitting nearby, looked like she wanted to speak, but I motioned for her to stay quiet. Carrie sat beside her, looking like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. A few months later, AJ headed off to Central Michigan University. Troy asked if he could go with her. While it seemed like a joke, I saw from his expression that he was completely serious. At home, with just Troy and me, Carrie and I were at least civil to each other. We did all the usual parenting duties, like attending his school events, but our relationship was entirely for show. From the outside, we appeared to be a perfectly normal, loving couple. Even though I could see how much the act was wearing on Carrie, I didn't care. I was focused on living my life and enjoying being a dad to my son. What bothered Carrie the most was that we lived separately at home. There was no touching, no sweet words, no playful jokes, and definitely no closeness. She couldn't just roll over in bed and expect something to happen because I wasn't there. Literally. I was in the basement guest room. The lack of closeness wasn't easy for me either, but knowing about her affair dulled my desire enough to deal with it. One evening, about 3 months after AJ left for school and Troy was out with friends, Carrie came down to the basement. Josh, can't we at least go back to being us? Physically? She asked softly. We always had a good Zex life. I never turned you down. Can't we at least return to that? I know you're human and you have needs, she pleaded. I looked her over. She was still a beautiful woman with a nice figure. It would just be Zex, nothing more. I wasn't in love with her anymore. Though I still cared about her, the love had faded. I knew I could go through the motions, but it wouldn't be the same. I'd get mine, and she'd get hers. That would be it. I guess so, I said slowly. But you'll have to come to my room. Knowing what I know now, you've tainted our marital bed too many times, and I won't touch you in it again. Yes, okay, I understand, she said, nodding. I'll come down in a few minutes. I just need to freshen up. She left, and I sat there feeling the weight of everything. Carrie's version of getting ready included some makeup, perfume, and a quick touch-up of her hair. When she came into my room a few minutes later, she was wearing my favorite lace teddy under her robe. Without a word, she dropped the robe and spun around for me. As I watched her, I had to force myself to think of Jorge to keep my excitement in check. It felt mechanical, detached, and wrong. After we were done, I rolled off her, lying back and feeling the physical release, but nothing emotionally fulfilling. There was a time when I would have enjoyed holding Carrie in the afterglow, but those days were long gone. I lay there staring at the ceiling while she quietly cried beside me. She must have sensed what I was feeling because she silently got up, put on her robe and lingerie, and went back upstairs without saying a word. There was no conversation, no pillow talk, just cold, empty silence. When I went upstairs to watch TV in the family room, I heard the shower running in the master bathroom. I sat there in gym shorts and a t-shirt, waiting for Troy to come home. When he arrived, he walked in with a concerned look on his face. "Dad, you haven't taken Mom out to a restaurant, a club, or anywhere else for months," he said. "Are you ever going to forgive her and be a real couple again?" I paused, thinking over his words, knowing this was a pivotal moment. I needed to choose my words carefully. Troy waited while I collected my thoughts. "Troy, I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive her enough to go back to what we had, or what I thought we had," I said slowly. "It was all fake. It was a lie. Your mother loves Uncle Jorge, and I'm just her fallback plan. Now that I know that, how can I go back to it? Football teams have backup quarterbacks, but marriages don't have backup husbands." Troy looked shocked, but I could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He nodded slightly, his face softening. Without another word, he went to his room. Carrie understood the truth too. Every few weeks she'd ask for personal time, which became our code for sex. Maybe she was secretly seeing someone else, but she knew that if she got caught, whatever followed would be on her. That wasn't my problem anymore. I was just going through the motions, meeting a physical need when necessary, but my heart wasn't in it. I don't know if Carrie felt the weight of Troy's graduation like I did. Maybe once she would have, but by then I had long since stopped caring about how she felt. I didn't love her anymore. I still cared for her in a basic way. We had history together. But her years of deception had worn my emotions down to nothing. I used to believe that hate was the opposite of love, but I learned that the real opposite of love is indifference. Troy left for the University of Oregon with 2 weeks' worth of clothes, 14 pairs of underwear, an iPad, a laptop, a cell phone, headphones, and a couple of boxes of other things. College life had definitely changed since my day. He was excited and talked almost non-stop during the 2-day trip. It felt like a 16-hour monologue. I don't think Carrie got more than a couple of words in, and I didn't even say that much. I don't think Troy even noticed he was the only one talking. After we dropped him off and said our goodbyes, the drive home was incredibly quiet. I drove for about 12 of the 16 hours. Carrie, as usual, was the navigator, which meant she was in charge of most of the music. If I hear another Michael Bolton ballad, I might lose my mind. I could tell Carrie was feeling melancholic about both kids almost being out of the house. Don't get me wrong, Carrie was a great mom, and I knew she loved the kids far more than she ever loved me. I might not have been her favorite, but AJ and Troy were her top priorities. Her mood was gloomy, and I could tell she wasn't thinking about the big picture, which was fine. I had stopped caring about her thoughts a long time ago. When we finally pulled into the driveway, I handed Carrie an envelope. She took it like it was something toxic, burst into tears, and ran into the house. I stood there for a moment, feeling oddly small. Looking back, I realized I'd been running on pure revenge for so long that I no longer knew why. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't fulfilling. It was just sad. I had kept my promise to Sergio. I told him I would stay with Carrie until Troy left for college, and I had given her 2 extra days. That was more than enough. I was lying in my basement room when I heard Carrie knock on the door. It was unlocked, so I told her to come in. "Do you hate me now, Josh?" she asked softly. "Did I ruin everything?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "You destroyed everything. But I don't hate you, Carrie. I just don't care about you anymore. But we had something good for so many years, until you found out, she said, her voice trembling. Is that true? I interrupted. It was all a lie to me. Once you left for Robbie and Hors the first time, you no longer loved only me like you promised. You no longer gave your body only to me like you vowed. You had a child with another man. Why couldn't you just be honest with me? After you fell in love with Jorge, why didn't you divorce me? Carrie began crying harder, struggling to find the words. You stayed with me and gave me 2 wonderful kids, I continued, my voice firm but not harsh. But you deceived me for 18 years. You stole 18 years from me. Years I could have spent looking for a woman to truly share my life with instead of being a selfish woman's second choice. Go back to Jorge, Carrie, can't you see? I'm setting you free. But I did love you, Josh. Don't you understand that? She cried, her voice breaking. I couldn't have stayed with you for 20 years if I didn't love you. I may not love you the way I love Jorge, but I do love you. I shook my head. Your definition of love is different from mine, Carrie. If you truly loved me, you would have done right by me. You wouldn't have kept me as your backup. I should have been your number 1. I deserve to be the man you were in love with. By deceiving me, you never gave me the chance to choose between being your second option or finding someone who wanted me as their first. I stood up, my voice softening slightly as I spoke the next words. You gave me 2 wonderful children. We had a good life, or at least it seemed that way to me, but everything vanished into thin air. Carrie stayed silent, her tears streaming down. You apparently got what you wanted, I continued. George got what he wanted. Robbie got what she wanted, and what did I get? I got nothing. Carrie started to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. So, what was your plan after the kids left home? Assuming I never found out about you and Jorge? Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It took a few seconds before she finally spoke. I guess I always thought I'd go back to Spain, to be with Jorge and Robbie, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Josh. I guess I never considered you in my long-term plans. I know, I responded just as softly. Carrie took a deep breath and nodded. I won't fight anything in the divorce, she said weakly, her voice almost a whisper. I was surprised that both of our kids were unhappy with my decision to divorce their mom. At first, they were upset with her for cheating on me for so long, but I think Carrie managed to convince them that her love for me was genuine. As for her love for Jorge, it had gone on for so long that they rationalized it. They even managed to convince themselves that I would be okay being their mom's second choice. And Robbie's fine with it. Why can't you just accept it like she does? AJ asked me one day, her tone accusatory. And Robbie helped plan it all, I said. She, Uncle Jorge, and your mom were making plans without me. Everyone but me was in on it. Why wasn't I? Because your mom knew I wouldn't agree. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? I paused, noticing AJ's defensive posture and knowing she wouldn't back down easily. Let me ask you something, AJ, I said, leaning forward. When you get married, would you let your husband have a mistress? One he cares about more than you? No! I'd kick his bum if he even suggested it, she said fiercely, her eyes flashing with anger. Exactly, I said softly. And yet I'm supposed to just get over it? Because it's been going on for 20 years, that makes it okay? So, how's Aunt Robbie? AJ winced and looked down, unable to respond. The conversation ended. My assumption that Carrie would move to Spain after the divorce was confirmed by the kids. I admit I missed the communication and family dynamics, but not the life we had because it was never real. I realized I no longer trusted women and sought help from a psychologist. I wasn't looking for a new relationship, though. I went on a few dates and occasionally, very rarely had sex, but it wasn't a priority anymore. I was surprised to find that among women in their 40s and 50s, there seemed to be a lot of singles. I guess I never noticed that when I was supposedly happily married. The dynamics between men and women had changed over the past 20 years. Back when I was single, it was mostly men doing the pursuing. Now, it felt like it was a 50-50 deal. It took some time to adjust to the new way of things. I have to admit, it's quite an ego boost when a woman approaches you to start dancing. It was the last person I expected to see when I opened the door one day, about 2 years after the divorce. It took me a few seconds to realize who I was looking at, even though she hadn't changed much since I last saw her. Robbie Santiago was still a stunning woman. Come in, Robbie, I said, still in shock. What brings you here? Can I visit an old friend if we're still friends? She asked timidly. She accepted the coffee I offered, and we sat down in the family room. She shifted in her seat and cleared her throat. "You haven't answered me, Josh. Are we still friends?" she asked. I wrinkled my face, thinking, "We used to be friends. At least, I thought so." Then I realized you didn't think so, I started to say, but she cut me off. "No, that's not true," she said quickly, her voice rising. "I always considered you a friend." "If I were a friend, how could you treat me the way you did?" I asked. "I was selfish and incredibly stupid," Robbie said, her voice cracking. "I never really thought about the consequences of my actions because I trusted Jorge and Carrie. Carrie was like a sister to me. I never imagined things would turn out like this. I went along with it because I managed to get Sergio out of the deal. And after that, for all these years, it was just a few days here and there. I like that you forbade her from seeing him for those few years. But then you divorced her and sent her right back to him, and into my life." She looked down, her voice trembling as she added, "I think after all these years, I'm tired of being his second-best woman. Now I fully understand what you meant." "It hurts, doesn't it?" I asked smugly, watching her avoid eye contact. Finally, someone felt remorse. "I think we can be friends again, in a way," I said after a long pause. Friends bound by shared experiences. We talked late into the night. We moved from coffee to a bottle of Pinot Grigio, which we finished. As she got ready to leave, I surprised us both by offering her my guest room. She accepted. Honestly, it felt funny to get a piece of my old life back. I think we both enjoyed reconnecting. The next weekend, she stayed with me again. We went out to dinner and then to a nice bar for drinks and dessert. It felt like two old friends, not a date, but somewhere along the way, things shifted. She was wearing a tight navy blue dress, showing off some cleavage and her toned legs. I didn't plan for anything to happen, so I was a bit caught off guard when I started getting aroused during dessert. I blushed, and she just smiled knowingly. She reached across the table and took my hand. We held hands for the rest of the evening. We were only a block away from my house when Robbie changed the game. "It doesn't have to mean anything, Josh," she said in a raspy voice. "You're a handsome single guy, and I'm in an open marriage. We're consenting adults." I grinned. I reached for her hand, found it, and kissed it. Clothes began falling to the floor almost immediately after we got back to my place, like a scene from a romantic movie. As we walked to my bedroom, I discovered Robbie was a fantastic kisser. When we reached the bedroom, I gently laid her on the bed. Her breathing became shallow, then ragged. She started shouting something in Spanish. I knew she was bilingual from living in Spain for so many years, but since I had only been to their house a few times, my Spanish wasn't great. "In English. Say it in English, baby. How am I supposed to know if you like it or not if you're speaking a language I barely understand?" I said, moving to the side to avoid hurting her with my weight. She smiled softly as I gazed into her eyes. I won't say it was the best sex I'd ever had, but it was the best since discovering Carrie's infidelity years ago. We did it again that night and once more in the morning. We showered together, happily washing each other's bodies, before I took her to IHOP for breakfast. We spent the rest of the day cuddling on the couch, kissing and watching TV. She didn't return to the guest room for the remainder of her stay, which lasted another 3 weeks. "I need to go back to Spain and divorce Jorge, then figure out what I want to do with my life," Robbie said. "I know we had fun together, but we both know we're not right for each other in the long term. Still, you're a damn good person, Josh. I'm really sorry I played a part in ruining your marriage. You didn't force her to do what she did, and at least you've shown remorse. That's more than I can say for Carrie," I replied. "Well, I hope you find someone who values everything you have to offer, which is a lot," Robbie said. Carrie had been living with Jorge for 5 years, and my kids moved to southern Spain to be closer to her. I miss them, but not their attitude. I'm tired of apologizing for divorcing their mother because she cheated on me. No one was more shocked than I was when Troy called at 6 in the morning. On a Sunday morning? Who the hell calls at 6 on a Sunday? I didn't even check the caller ID. I just grabbed the phone and yelled, "What? This better be a damn emergency or someone's going to get it." "Dad, it's me. Troy, why are you so mad?" he asked. "It's 6 in the morning on a Sunday, Troy. Did you forget about the time difference?" I snapped. Yeah, I guess I did, Dad," he mumbled. "I'll call you later." "No, Troy, don't hang up. What's going on?" I asked. This is hard to say, but here goes. Did you know AJ is sleeping with Uncle Jorge?" he said, more of a statement than a question. At that point, I'd had about 3 hours of sleep after a late night with a girl who could have been my son's date. But that's a whole other story. By the time Troy finished, I was wide awake. What? What did you just say? I shouted into the phone. You heard me, Dad. AJ is sleeping with Uncle Jorge, he repeated. How do you know that? I asked, still shouting. We were all at Uncle Jorge's, AJ, Sergio, and Maida. When it got late, the kids went to bed, leaving just Uncle Jorge and Mom. In the middle of the night, I was woken by a woman's scream, and I realized it wasn't Mom. I went to AJ's door and listened because I thought I'd have to eliminate Sergio. He's her half-brother, after all. But it wasn't him. It was worse. It was Uncle Jorge, he said. You're sure? I asked, barely able to breathe. Yes, he whispered. I mean, she's 27, Dad. She can decide who to sleep with, but still, it's creepy. You know what I mean? And your mother doesn't care? I asked. He hesitated. I'm not sure she knows, he said. 2 days later, I stood at Jorge's front door, waiting. When Carrie answered, she gasped. Josh, what are you doing here? She asked, clearly shocked. I was in the area and wanted to see my kids. Is there a problem with that? I asked harshly. She stepped aside and let me in. Why didn't you call? You could have stayed here if we'd known, she said. I glared at her as all 3 kids and Jorge entered the room. The kids rushed to hug me, but Jorge kept his distance. The kids started talking at once, but quickly quieted down. When I approached Jorge with fury in my eyes, he raised his hands in surrender. It didn't matter. I'm not a great fighter, but I can hold my own. This time, rage was on my side. I swung my fist in frustration, aiming to push him back, and he stumbled, clearly taken by surprise. He stumbled back, and I strike him in the stomach with both hands. I stepped back, breathing heavily as everyone stared in shock. Uncle Josh, you promised you wouldn't hurt Dad for what he did to Aunt Carrie, Sergio yelled, staying in place. I glared at Jorge, who was writhing in pain while Carrie rushed to him. I didn't break my promise, I yelled back. He got this knocking for touching my daughter, your half-sister. Did you know he had sex with your sister? I asked, turning to Carrie. Her face went from fearful to stunned as she looked at me, then at Jorge. What is he talking about? She asked, her voice trembling. Jorge was curled up, bleeding and whimpering. I'm old enough to choose who I sleep with, AJ said, stepping forward. I don't need your permission. Yes, you're old enough to make your own mistakes, like sharing a man with your mother, I spat, still furious. Even if that man ruined your parents' marriage. But you, like your mother and that idiot on the floor, are old enough to understand that every action has consequences. His actions gave me the chance to do what I couldn't do before. For entertaining your mother, I promised Sergio I wouldn't hurt him back then. Sergio stayed silent, his eyes wide. Thank you for giving me the chance to do something I should have done long ago. But AJ, your choice of partners is troubling, given everything that's happened. AJ blushed, glancing between me and her mother. Sorry, Mom, she muttered. Carrie's gaze shifted to Jorge, still groaning on the floor. I saw the moment her expression hardened. Without hesitation, she swung her leg as hard as she could, kicking Jorge square in the face. He groaned and passed out instantly. Nice shot, Mom, Troy said, clearly impressed. Sorry, Uncle Josh, I didn't know about Dad and AJ. It's just wrong, Sergio added, his voice filled with disbelief. Yes, Sergio, but it's not your fault, and it's not your job to apologize, I said, trying to calm down. Kids, it was great seeing you. Though, AJ, we've got a lot to talk about at some point. I turned to Carrie. It wasn't exactly nice to see you, but I've got some sightseeing to do before I head home. Now, if you don't mind. I walked to the door, but stopped. Oh, by the way, you have my number. If that idiot on the floor decides to press charges, just give me a call. I'm not running. That won't happen, Uncle Josh, Sergio said firmly. I promise. Dad and I need to have a talk, too. I left the house, my mind spinning from everything that had just happened, and the shocked looks on my kids' faces stayed with me for a long time. As I walked away, all I could think about was how absurd the whole situation had become. Family drama, betrayal, and difficult choices. It all felt surreal. A few days later, I found myself on a plane, preparing for my first skydive. Everyone screams when they land after their first jump, and I was no exception. It was incredible. My feet touched the ground first, and since my legs were outstretched, I landed carefully on my bum and screamed in excitement. I quickly jumped to my feet, grabbed the parachute, and felt my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Yes, yes, yes! I shouted again as the jump master came over, congratulating me and checking if I was okay. Great jump, Josh! he said enthusiastically as I collected my gear and headed back to the garage where people were waiting to greet me. I was sweating profusely, and all the sounds around me seemed louder and more vivid. Maybe this is what a near-death experience feels like, I thought. Okay, maybe I went overboard with that, but after the birth of my kids, this was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced. Better than marriage, even better than my first time having sex. I couldn't fully describe what I'd just been through. At 51 and divorced for years, I'd been practically living on autopilot, but my recent trip to Spain had given me a new spark. More specifically, knocking up Jorge Santiago had done wonders for my mood. The day after I got back to the States, I practically jumped out of bed. I laced up my New Balance sneakers and hit the road. I had gotten back into jogging over the past year, but getting in shape had been tough. That morning, though, I almost skipped into work, filled with energy. My receptionist, Teresa, noticed right away. 5 minutes after I walked in, she appeared at my door with a cup of coffee and a notepad, giving me a knowing look. Okay, spill it. You spent a week in Spain having sex, didn't you? She teased, raising an eyebrow. I grinned. Even better, Teresa. I found my groove. Who knew you went on holiday in the south of Spain? She replied, smirking. That's great, Josh. I'm happy for you. You deserved it. Life felt different after that. I signed up for a couple of classes at a local college just for fun. One was about Chinese culture, and the other, even more laid back, was on classic rock. Most of the people in the class were around my age, but there were a few younger folks, likely forced into their parents' music. A month later, despite still being afraid of heights, I signed up for another skydive. It was wild, but necessary. After our jumps, a few of us newbies hung out, celebrating, drinking sodas, and teasing each other about our lack of style. I was on my second soda, munching on M&Ms from the vending machine, when a woman came into the garage, still buzzing with excitement. She barely managed to get her helmet off, and when she did, her curly blonde hair tumbled out, followed by lavender blue eyes and a dazzling smile, like something straight out of a dental commercial. For the second time that day, I felt like my heart might stop. I nearly choked on my candy when she took off her overalls. It was a warm day, and she wore a tight t-shirt and very tight jeans. She looked about 30, though I later found out she was 44. Her name was Evie Abraham. Maybe because she was petite, she seemed even more animated than the rest of us, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. As we all sat around talking about our jumps, I realized I was staring. Hoping I wasn't drooling, I quickly looked away and tried to act natural. When I snuck another glance, I noticed there was no ring on her left hand. After that, we chatted for a while until Evie got up and headed toward the parking lot. I didn't hesitate to get up and follow her. I left the airfield that day with memories to last a lifetime and a date set for the following Saturday night. On our first date, I took her to a Chinese restaurant. She spent the first 10 minutes excitedly recounting her first skydive, the energy in her voice contagious. I completely understood her. After all, we had shared the same adrenaline rush. Eventually, we started talking about our personal lives. I told her about my ex-wife and my 2 kids. She told me about her late husband and her own 2 children. Her husband had been eliminated by a drunk driver when she was just 34, leaving her to raise their kids on her own. As she shared her story, her voice softened, and I could see tears forming in her eyes, though she worked hard to hold them back. After the first year without him, I promised myself I wouldn't mourn anymore, she said quietly. I know I cried a lot for myself, feeling sorry for me and the kids, but that's not what Dan would have wanted. He would have said, "Stop crying. It's time to move forward." So that's what we did. We'll never forget him, but we honor his memory by living life the best way we can. Her words touched me deeply. I didn't mention it, but I had cried many times over my failed marriage. Yet here she was, strong and full of grace, living with such wisdom. He sounds like a smart man, I said softly, giving such wise advice to someone he never even met. Evie tilted her head and smiled, a gesture I quickly learned meant she liked what I'd said. Over time, I understood that she had taken on both the roles of mother and father for her kids. She had become something of a tomboy because of it. In her early 30s, she learned how to throw baseballs and soccer balls with precision. She even bragged that she could balance on hockey skates while holding a stick. She hadn't been into sports as a kid, but with 2 athletic children, she made it a point to be supportive. That meant learning all the ins and outs of the sports they played and how to treat the inevitable cuts and bruises. "I can apply a butterfly bandage like a pro, and I'm great at icing injuries," she said proudly. Armed with that knowledge, I took her to a Cincinnati Reds baseball game for our second date. She surprised me by grabbing the program, flipping to the scorecard, and tallying the game's points. Damn, most guys I know can't even keep score, and this girl's a pro at it, I thought, impressed. My son played baseball and my daughter played softball. I was the official stat guy for both teams, she said, using air quotes around stat guy. She was 5 feet tall, energetic, and full of enthusiasm. She liked wearing tight t-shirts, jeans, and sneakers, and soon she fit into my world as easily as she fit under my arm. By the end of our first date, I got a chaste kiss on the cheek. By the second date, we shared soft kisses on the lips. After that, the kissing became more intense, but I didn't feel like it was the right time to push for more. That changed on our 6th date when she made the first move. "Am I not doing it for you, Josh?" she asked while we were kissing on her living room couch. "I mean, you haven't laid a finger on me yet, and I really want something more from you than just a finger," she teased, tilting her head with that familiar smile. I felt my face flush like a teenager. "It's been a long time for me," I stammered. "No, not for this," I replied, seeing Evie grinning like the Cheshire Cat. "I just think we could have something special, and I guess I'm afraid I might ruin it." "Oh, honey, that's not going to happen. At least not for me. Now, how about you show me how fast you can get unclothed?" she said, her eyes sparkling. 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months after that, we had a small wedding with just her 2 children, my son and Sergio. AJ, though invited, chose not to attend because I hadn't invited her new husband, George, whom Carrie had divorced almost immediately after discovering he was sleeping with her daughter. No wonder we didn't go to Spain for our honeymoon.